So now we're going to hear from another one of the digital dozen, which are the top 12 companies in Wales who are making an impact in the digital space. The company is Object Matrix. The sales and marketing director is Nick Pearce, and he's going to tell us how to expand our horizons, which sounds a bit interesting. So I'm going to ask the crew at the back to introduce Nick Pearce, please.
I see shit, man. Hello. So, someone mentioned if you don't enjoy it, don't do it a second ago. I think I should evaluate that, really. And the reason I'm dressed up in this silly suit is as a small company, you kind of have to ask yourself, what are you willing to do to stand out from the crowd in an international market? I wouldn't recommend this personally, but it has worked really quite well for us. I'm going to try and take this off whilst I talk. So Object Matrix is a company based in Cardiff. We started in 2003. I have to go double jointed on this bit. Sorted, it's right. And we're employees with a digital storage background. We recognized the move to disk-based archiving back then and took a punt that we could create a product to address that market. And our product's called Matrix Store, and it's based on object storage technology. And we're currently recruiting. So back in 2003, these three geeks decided there was going to be a data tsunami. And that vision came true. We're currently dealing with a huge amount of data, whether it's metadata, video content, big data, Internet of Things. And organizations are now storing petabytes of content. So, anyone know what a petabyte is? Hands up. Okay. So for those who don't, a petabyte is 1,000 terabytes. Everyone know what a terabyte is? It's roughly the size of the disk in your computer at home. So how heavy is it? In kilos. 2 kilos for a petabyte. Okay. So in 1980, it was 250,000 tons and cost $40 billion. Then 2009, it was as little as 365 kilos. And the beginning of this year, it was 106 kilos. And as of today, it's actually 81 kilos due to 8 terabyte drives. But what this really tells us is, back in the 1980s, it was really hard to keep everything on disk because it was expensive and it was big. It's actually the weight of an oil tanker. And you just can't afford to keep a petabyte of content on that sort of platform. Whereas today, it's more feasible because it's more affordable and it's more accessible. So we built a really technically advanced and cool product based on object storage technology. And object storage technology is currently used, if you use cloud storage of any sort, that's the platform it's based on. It's called Matrix Store. It's the storage geek, so you don't have to be. It's like a private cloud. It enables big data applications, cloud, private cloud, and it's a digital preservation platform. It also enables us to keep moments like this preserved for all eternity. Are there any Welshmen and Welsh people in the room? That's a memorable image. So that's the end of the story, okay? Hit the beach, we've made it. We've made this great product. We've met a market demand. Unfortunately, this happened. We were a bunch of geeks. We built a great product. We got a couple of customers, but we were terrible at selling. Absolutely awful. And this isn't a revenue chart. This is our happiness chart. And we went into a trough of despair for a number of years because we were floating around, hitting every sort of market you can imagine, and there wasn't a sales guy amongst us. So that should have killed us. Dead, RIP. But being an entrepreneur and being a Welshman, we never say die. Never, ever. We carry on. So we had to overcome some challenges. And focus is one of the biggest things you can do as an organization, whether you're a big organization or a small organization. Without focus, you will not succeed. So this was our target market in 2003 and 2008. We're going to take on the world. We're going to beat all the big guys. We're going to get rid of tape. Everything's going to be stored in our product. But it didn't work. So we had to really focus on a market. So which market do you attack? CCTV, lots of data, finance, medical, space, government. Many of those, unsurprisingly, aren't that willing to take a risk on a bunch of guys from Caerphilly, as it turns out. But the media was. And it's a market in flux. It's still a market in flux. You've got to know your market. So the media market's going through changes. Possibly all of you have a HD TV these days. If you don't, then you're already behind the times because UHD is here. And that takes up a lot more space when making programs in terms of storage than SD and HD. None of you have, well, I imagine very few of you take photographs using a tape-based camera anymore. It's either on your phone or it has an SD card in it. What do you do with that data? How do you find it? Well, the problem is worse for broadcasters and filmmakers. They're creating a huge amount of content. The camera never stops rolling because they have enough disk. But they have to put that somewhere. To give you an idea of what big data is, this is a bunker under the Tottenham Court Road in London. There's 4 miles of tunnels, rammed with every sort of tape you can imagine. I have to excuse the cheesy music. That can go on quite a bit, and does. But it gives you an idea of how hard it is if you wanted to reuse or repurpose or monetize any of the content that sat in that place, you'd have to find it. And not only do you have to find it, a lot of it is sat on obsolescent platforms. So you'd have to have a specialist to restore it so you could reuse it. That's big, heavy, dirty data. And it takes a lot of energy and time to get your hands on it. And so the broadcast market has moved away from it to disk-based. So when you find a market, you have to make your product fit the market you want to work in. Become part of the ecosystem, and that's what we did. Our storage, our background is in digital preservation, in storage, but we've become experts in the broadcast and post-production workflow. So if you watch Strictly Come Dancing, the last 4 years, all of their content has been protected in our platform because we help them with the workflow of how to use it, find it, and search for it afterwards. So Matrix Store, we made become the perfect fit for that. Geography focus. Again, our initial target market was quite wide. And so we decided we had to really sort of narrow it down a little and get a bit more close to where we could be. And we ended up really thinking that in order to be a global company, we really needed to start it as a local enterprise. And I'd say that to yourselves. I mean, a lot of enterprises can sell over the internet, but if you're selling to an enterprise, they want to see you. And you have to build up that local reputation before you can go to your neighbor and start selling to them. So think global, but start local. If you can't sell on your doorstep, you might struggle to sell to people who don't understand you as well. So our first customer, once we made this transition in 2009, was actually less than a mile from our office. A Welsh company called Gorilla now, but they were called Monkey. So we decided then to roll that out to the rest of the UK. We'd proven our model. But where next? Now, we were told repeatedly by industry analysts, investment funds, you'll never make it as an enterprise storage player if you're not based in the Valley. Never mind in the UK, but in Wales, but unless you're in the Valley, you'll never make it. No, you'll never get funding, you'll never get the connections. And we said to those people, well, we are in the Valley. We're in plenty of valleys. We just don't have the connections, the money, the resource, and the Rolodex to help us go. And that's what we need. So once we sort of rolling out into the UK, the next step, logical step, was France for us. It's on our neighbor. A couple of us speak a bit of French, and so we went to France. But working in different areas has its challenges. In France, it's the same in Spain. They don't like buying from people outside their country. And people buy from people, whether it's in Wales, England, Scotland, France, Vietnam, Brazil, people buy from people. So you have to get a local presence of some sort. And we were helped enormously by John Rees, who was part of International Business Wales, back when that was an organization. And he helped us to get introduced to French companies that we wanted to work with. And we had an invitation to take people to dinner to the Matignon, which is the Prime Minister's residence. And at the time, Madame Fillon, Penelope, was the Prime Minister's wife, and she's from Abergavenny. So we'll talk about using our Welsh diaspora later on, but that was a perfect example of a Welsh person who's left Wales willing to help Welsh companies break into a market. The French guy who I now work with, he agreed to come and meet at this event. It was the first time we've met. He said, "Oh, but I will not stay for dinner." No. And when he sat down at the head table of the Prime Minister's wife, he turned to me and said, "I will stay for dinner." It was really important. It was that level of access that I would never be able to achieve. And the Welsh government did that. And it would be great if at some point the Welsh government thought about how to do that in every country and territory. Speaking the language, I mean, many more French people and Spanish people speak a lot of English. But unless you respect the market you're going into by making an effort, create PDFs in French, make an effort with your website. It doesn't have to be the whole website, part of your website. And try and learn to speak some of the language. Even if it's hello, how are you, no problem, those sorts of things, they really appreciate it. But it can lead to problems. So I was sitting at a meeting with some French people, at a business meeting, and we're trying to explain the difference between French bread and British bread. And I was trying to say that we have conservatives in our bread that keep them for longer. But I use the word preservative, because that's to us is preservative. But in French, the word for preservative is condom. So I said, "Oh yes, we have condoms in our bread in the UK." To which one guy turned to the other and said, "Yeah, that is why it's so shit." But they remembered me, and I made a complete fool of myself, but it was great. They remembered me. And now we have a great relationship. So it's making an effort. If you don't make an effort, they won't like you at all. Parisians are rude and arrogant until you try and get to know them, or try and make an effort. And also, try and find your common points. I personally love rugby. The French, in general, love rugby. So every Friday night before the Wales-France match in Paris, we host an event, and we invite our target audience, and they're not allowed in the bar unless they're wearing a Welsh beret. And we've had the CTOs of all the French broadcasters coming in wearing the beret. We sent one out because he wasn't wearing it, and he came back in and put it on. Totally non-business meeting, but a great way to build relationships. And the cost of that to us as a company was about €1,000, the bar bill. I'll never get that coverage in a magazine or any sort of ad print. We do trade shows, one in Paris, and we have a Welsh evening. We take Welsh cheese, Welsh whiskey, Welsh beer, and we take Welsh wine. And we had a blind tasting with Welsh wine and French wine. And we had a queue of people, not to talk to us about our storage, but they couldn't believe there was a Welsh wine. But again, it brought people, and our name got out there. So consequently, our revenue in France went from £18,000 in 2011 to, we're almost approaching £1 million today. So once we did that, we looked at what other nations should you go to. Now, if you go and try and target America, you need a lot of money and people on the ground. But there are nations who are growing in a growth phase that will be more accepting of small companies to help them solve their problems. And the BRICS are those: Brazil, Russia, India, and China. So how do you reach them? How do you reach any market? We need to build a reseller channel. You can't be in Brazil spending the 3 years to build a relationship with a customer. The reseller can, and has, and will. It'll be more expensive, it'll be a bit frustrating at times, but it's the only way, unless you're going to put money and people in the game. Trade shows and get social. More often than not, even in the UK, well, especially in the UK, Chief engineers, CTOs, they rely sometimes on system integrators and reseller partners. They trust them to tell them what's a great solution. They don't buy direct, they always buy through a channel. And so you really need to build a sales channel, meet partners at trade shows. They should be the first people you attack. These days, if you want to publish a book, you have to go and get an agent first to publish a book. It's the same process. It's very difficult to go direct. So our object matrix reseller network was 1 in 2006. Beginning of the year was 44, and now it's up to 48. We've just come back from a trade show in Las Vegas. So trade shows. The truth is, if you don't go to trade shows where your customers go, you do not exist. You really do not exist. And so we don't have much of a marketing budget. We have to do silly things to get ourselves seen. But we do put money into attending trade shows and having a good presence there. If you've been downstairs, you've probably seen our sign on our little booth downstairs. We've had it built and we can reuse it globally. Also, if you're trying to get in touch with a CTO, if they're in the country where they work, you won't get 5 minutes with them because they've got meetings. If the C-level executives go to Las Vegas for a week to a trade show, you have them for the week. They will find time to speak to you. So we go to a lot of these shows initially, not to see the international market, but to actually meet UK customers who won't see us in London, but they will see us in Las Vegas or Amsterdam. So if you've got a product to sell, go to a trade show that's relevant to your market. It's the only way that people will take note. And helps at hand for that, especially here in Wales. Welsh Government Overseas Business Development something scheme. This really helps. What this does is it gives you some funding towards a trade show. And if you've been to that trade show before, sometimes they're a bit coy about giving you the same funding. But what it does is if they fund one trade show, then we can fund going to another one. And so we really hope they don't stop this scheme. And Kerry Davis, who's floating around downstairs, she's been really great at helping us secure that funding. There are organizations, if you don't want the hassle of building your own stand, thinking about location, then Trade Fair UK. That's their Twitter ID. They don't just do broadcasts, they do mobile comms, they do everything. And they're well worth getting in touch with. These guys take about 60 exhibitors to every show. So they have the bargaining power for position, so you get a good position in the hall. And also they can build stands for you and make sure it's all set up. It's a more expensive way of doing it, but it's worth it. If you do a trade show, position's key. There's no point being in the car park. You might as well, and you have to book early. And that sort of is a bit of a problem with the funding model. If you're going to do regular trade shows, build your own stand, reuse it, put it in a lockup, and take it to new shows. Work with Trade Fair. And trade shows are only good if you pre-booked appointments. Rearrange to meet people at a certain time. People stopping and just seeing your signage and asking about your product is just a bonus. But you should never rely on that. So you probably can tell that we believe that traditional advertising is dead and that truly people buy from people in this market. So you really have to be bold and brave and build a personality that will be remembered. If you've got a passion for your business, show that passion. Your customers will love it, your investors will love it. People like to see the passion that you believe in what you're doing. So we've taken some slightly alternative routes. This is our version of the Hello Magazine competition. We gave out, at the last World Cup at trade shows, about 40 rugby jerseys with our logos on it. And we asked people to go and get them taken in funny places around the world, and we'd give them some free product. We had all 40 of those people took pictures from around the world. And the guy in the tank there is Vaughan Smith, founder of the Frontline Club in London, sat on a tank in Camp Bastion wearing an object matrix top. So if you can build that community of customers and followers, then they'll do a lot for you. And it's great advertising. Yeah, Petterman. So when you're in a trade show and your stand is 6 meters by 3, which is probably not so much bigger than this, and your competitor's trade show is the rest of the hall, then you get dwarfed. It's hard to be seen, no matter how good your position is. So you have to think about how you can stand out, whether it's a Welsh evening or dressing up in outfits. And all I can say is you're lucky that I didn't have to wear the other outfit today. That's a bit more grim. But and advertise the fact that you're going, be a little bit creative about it. The net effect is our Flickr page has about 1,000 photos of the different shows where people have come up to us and have asked to have the picture with Petterman, which is unfortunate because in France and Spain, Petter means fart. So I think they're having a picture because they're with Fartman at a trade show and not because they're with Petterman. But that's fine. That's one of those vagaries of working in the international market, is that you soon find out what works and doesn't. But they start conversations, and those people then go off and tell their friends about it. For the Welsh people in the room, do not be afraid to play the Welsh card, as Warren East set up in Hay the other week. Use it as a differentiator. People want to know where you're from. Tell them you're from Wales. And if they ask you why, where is it, explain to them. People are interested in you. People buy from people, and they want to know who you are and where you're from. We've recently started an organization called Global Welsh, and Walter, who sat in the row there, is heading up as a project director. And our aim is to reach out to the Welsh diaspora, and see how we can help each other. So Penelope Fion was a great example of how our Welsh diaspora has helped us. We're at the really beginning phase of this project, and we need people to join us and sort of expand our network to find out more Welsh people or people with an affinity for Wales who'd be willing to help, mentor, sponsor, invest, create a network outside the UK to help Welsh companies. And technology is also here to help. And we, during our time, have used all of these technologies. Salesforce for our CRM, chasing customers and opportunities. Skype, even when it drops out every 2 minutes, it's great. LinkedIn, Twitter. I'm not a fan of FaceAche. Confluence, Basecamp, all of them. Some of them are online collaboration tools you can use with your customers. Some of them are internal tools for collaborating internally, Confluence. So if you want to ask me any questions about those tools, then feel free afterwards. The net effect is that we started out in our Welsh companies. We then went to the rest of the UK. From there, we went to France. It was obviously Bastille Day that day. And the rest of Europe. We then tackled Latin America. We have 6 broadcasters in Latin America using our solution. We have a couple of customers in the USA because we're slowly entering that market. And more recently, we've just sold into Malaysia. We just sold into Vietnam this week. And pretty much from here, our happiness chart looks a little bit better because we've got revenue, we're employing people, and we've got loads of opportunity for growth. And so really the journey continues. If you've got any questions, I'm here far away now, or my contact details are there. We are recruiting. If anyone knows anyone who wants a sales and marketing role, or software engineers, test engineers. And luckily, there's no need to worry about dress code because we have plenty of uniforms for people to wear. So, thank you very much. Any questions? Nope. Okay, thanks very much. Thanks very much for your time. Cheers.